When you look at Mistfall Hunter, you can tell that Bellring Games isn't a massive studio, but it's also not one of those five-person teams making a game in a basement. They have around 70 developers, which is a fairly substantial size, and that explains a lot of what I felt in the demo. You can notice they have the resources to polish combat and build attractive environments, but at the same time, the game still carries that first studio feel, you know? That drive to prove they can pull off something big without a From Software budget. Honestly, that's one of the game's charms. What catches my attention is the cadence they've maintained since the announcement in October 2024. In less than 2 years, they went through several testing phases. Beta 2 in April 2025, Beta 3 in September of the same year, and then the open demo in June 2026. This shows a team that is actually listening to feedback and isn't afraid to put the game in players' hands early. You can see they aren't trying to deliver a closed product in a pretty box. They want to see what works in the real world. And look, over 100,000 players participated in Beta 2 alone, so the interest is definitely there. Director Haoliang Haozhang made it clear that they are building a game they themselves want to play, rather than simply chasing market trends. That is rare these days. When I played the demo, I felt exactly that. It isn't an Escape from Tarkov clone with a fantasy skin, nor a forced Souls-like. It's a strange, unique hybrid, and you can tell it was born out of genuine passion. Sure, it still has rough edges, but I'd choose a game with identity 1,000 times over another generic product spawned from a trend spreadsheet. The launch delay, from 2025 to July 29, 2026, also felt like a mature decision to me. Instead of rushing and delivering a broken release, they stated they needed more time, especially to launch simultaneously on PC, Xbox Series, and PS5. This included adding optimizations, the new Withered Knight class, and mechanical adjustments. Anyone who plays early access game demos knows the nightmare of a rushed launch. Seeing Bellring prioritize the health of the project over hitting an arbitrary date gives me more confidence in the final product. Another detail proving they have their eyes on the community is the addition of female class options, something brought into Beta 3 as one of the most requested features by players. This might seem minor, but it shows the studio is reading what people are saying. Furthermore, they lowered the minimum GPU requirements to a GTX 1660, which demonstrates a real effort not to exclude players without high-end PCs. It's not every day you see an ambitious game trying to remain accessible. The publishing agreement with Skystone Games is another interesting factor. The studio was co-founded by David Brevik, co-creator of the original Diablo. This means behind the scenes, there are people who understand ARPGs and know what makes a loot and progression loop addictive. I'm not saying this guarantees success, but it gives a degree of assurance that design decisions are supervised by someone who has made history in the genre. Mistfall Hunter is Bellring's debut project, but it isn't floating in the dark without guidance. The narrative in Mistfall Hunter caught me in a very specific way during the demo. It isn't a plot that grabs you by the collar with lengthy cutscenes and epic monologues. It works more as a dark backdrop that you gradually sense while playing, as if the world is revealing itself to you piece by piece. Following the war between the supreme gods and the outer gods, almost everything collapsed. The blood of the fallen gods became the Gildan Mist, a golden, corrupted fog that spreads madness and turns living beings into monsters. When you enter the map for the first time, that sense of post-Ragnarok ruin hits hard. The world is broken, and you feel it in every corner. What intrigued me right away was Du's role. She is a fragment of the goddess of fate, traveling the world to resurrect fallen heroes and grant them immortal bodies. You become a guild hunter because of her. You aren't a chosen hero from a cliché prophecy. You are someone who died, came back, and now must hunt Gildan blood to try to mend the web of fate. In the demo, Du appears in the camp with a quiet, mysterious presence. I kept looking at her and wondering, what exactly does she want from us? Bellring hasn't revealed everything yet, and that's a good thing. I prefer mystery over excessive exposition. The web of fate is the overarching objective behind everything. The idea is that it doesn't judge, it remembers. You collect the golden blood of the corroded and other hunters to stitch this web back together. It's a concept both beautiful and tragic. You aren't saving the world with a final blow to a boss. You are undertaking thousands of small extraction runs, dying, returning, and trying again. In the demo, this works well because the narrative integrates into the core gameplay loop. Every successful run feels like a small fragment of hope restored. Every death feels like the world reminding you that the web remains shattered. What unsettled me a bit, in a positive way, is how fragmented the lore still is. There are mentions of gods like Kyrnos and Misty, the legend of Saeria Sith as the incarnation of the supreme divinity, mischasers recording events in journals, and blasphemers stealing sacred relics to use as weapons. In the demo, you pick up pieces of this through camp dialogue and scattered journals. I read everything I found. It's the type of storytelling that rewards players who pay attention, while leaving those who just want to fight somewhat on the outside. And I like that. You don't need to explain everything at once. The Norse and Viking setting goes a long way in supporting the narrative weight. Weaverreach, the mist-shrouded continent featuring locations like Windrest, carries that desolate wasteland vibe following the demise of the gods. Ruins, corridors filled with golden mist, twisted creatures. The narrative doesn't need a cutscene to tell you the world ended. It shows you. When you are escaping with loot and see another group of guild hunters heading your way, the lore takes on another layer of meaning. There are no heroes here, just survivors trying to piece together the remnants of a shattered destiny. I gave considerable thought to the absence of a traditional linear campaign. The narrative lives in the hub, the NPCs, the missions between runs, and environmental texts. For an extraction game, this makes complete sense, though it demands more effort from the player. You have to want to uncover it. I wanted to. After a few hours in the demo, I was already forming theories about what Do really is, and whether the Web of Fate can truly be repaired. Bellring seems to be constructing lore that expands alongside the game, rather than dumping a history book on you during the tutorial. Mistfall Hunter's story left me with that satisfying feeling of wanting more. It isn't the most original plot in existence, but it possesses personality and fits the game's identity seamlessly. A divine post-apocalyptic world, resurrected heroes, a fog corrupting everything, and a mysterious girl holding the last thread of hope. After playing the demo and reading everything Bellring has released so far, I left wanting to go back to camp, talk to Do again, and attempt another run. Because ultimately, the story isn't telling you what happened. It is inviting you to try and fix what remains. Mistfall Hunter utilizes third-person combat, classes, abilities, and loot, but the tension doesn't stem solely from winning a tough fight. It comes from deciding whether it's worth continuing to explore when you're already carrying gear you don't want to lose. The combat felt heavy and committed, particularly with melee options. Strikes don't feel designed for mindless button mashing. Every push, dodge, and skill alters your positioning. At the same time, I wouldn't say it has the precision or fluidity of a major Souls-like, and that might be the comparison that harms it most. In practice, it plays more like a deliberate, position-focused action RPG than a direct Dark Souls copy. The absence of a lock-on, at least from what I experienced in the demo, is a design choice that divides opinion, but it aligns with the direction. It forces you to aim, judge distance, and take care not to overcommit into a crowd or miss a thrust in PvP. This makes encounters less predictable, though I believe the camera and movement still require refinement so that a death feels like the result of my decision rather than a confusing read of the situation. What I appreciated most was how the game connects PvE, PvP, and extraction. Map enemies don't exist merely to fill corridors. They deplete healing, stamina, and attention prior to a potential player encounter. This structure gives weight even to a simple fight, because arriving weak into a duel can cost you that match's entire loadout. Classes also look to be the element that could grant the gameplay longevity. The developer promises 6 classes, 2 weapon stances per class, mid-combat stance swapping, talent trees, active skills, and stat-driven gear. On paper, this opens room for distinct builds without turning every character into the same template with different weapons. My reservation is that the demo hasn't fully convinced me that all classes will share the same level of efficiency, especially since mobility, reach, and animation recovery tend to heavily define PvP. The extraction mechanic is likely the smartest idea in the game so far. Instead of simply running to a fixed exit point, you must track down and defeat the returner woodling to secure the extraction item, all while the Gildan Mist forces players closer together. I like this approach because it turns leaving into a minor hunt and avoids the mechanical feel of simply memorizing evacuation zones. On the other hand, balancing this phase will be crucial so it doesn't become a frustrating or overly random routine. My view is that Mistfall Hunter functions best when treated as a fantasy extraction game with heavy action combat, rather than the next Souls-like. The demo already exhibits its own identity through its mix of risk, enclosed exploration, builds, and PvPvE combat, but I still see room for improvements in movement, input responsiveness, and balance across fighting styles. If Bellring can polish these core mechanics without diluting the tension of losing loot, the gameplay has the potential to engage far more than the trailer suggests. I liked the dark presentation right away. The dense fog covering corrupted forests and ancient ruins creates a heavy atmosphere that matches the high-stakes extraction tone. It isn't the type of graphic fidelity that leaves you speechless on the first screen, but it has a consistency that shows effort went into maintaining that dark identity throughout. What caught my attention during the demo was the implementation of Unreal Engine. You can see the engine's distinct characteristics at various points: dramatic lighting, fog particle effects, and vivid magic visuals, alongside classic early build issues. Hair and clothing occasionally float or clip strangely, and there are times when you can look underneath assets or notice textures that still need care. Nothing breaks the experience completely, but it remains clear this is a demo rather than a final product. Comparing it to what the developer showed in official materials, the art direction appears well-defined. Class armors feature distinct silhouettes: the heavy mercenary, the agile archer, the sorcerer with arcane details. And the more elaborate enemies, excluding basic skeletons, show interesting visual design, featuring corruption motifs and a clear Norse influence. I got the impression they drew significant inspiration from Elden Ring, not as a blatant copy, but in a doing homework by looking at a classmate's notebook way, that many have noted. The landscapes in the demo left me divided. There are moments when the Sacred Grove or mist areas look impressive, with twilight filtering through trees and establishing a persistent sense of danger. In other sections, however, the environment feels somewhat empty or repetitive, as if lacking detail density to fill the space. Official trailers present a richer environment, so I hope the full release delivers what was shown in promotional media. Combat visual effects and magic stand out as a highlight. When you activate an ability or land a critical hit, the particles and visual flashes provide solid weight to the action. This felt decently polished in the demo, and videos released by Bellring reinforce that they want this visual clarity so fights remain readable even during chaotic PPVV encounters. Still, I noticed instances of stuttering and frame drops that impaired image smoothness, particularly in busier scenes. In the demo, you can already see that armors and dyes significantly alter appearances, and official materials promise further options. I liked how each class maintains its own color scheme: blues and golds for the sorcerer, metallic tones for stealth, which aids quick identification mid-combat. I only felt that some female and male models still require broader facial and hair variation to avoid looking generic. Ultimately, after running the demo and reviewing what the developer has released, I come away with a positive yet cautious impression. Mistfall Hunter's graphics aren't revolutionary, nor are they the game's strongest asset right now, but they possess personality, atmosphere, and potential. If they resolve rendering issues, add density to environments, and maintain consistent art direction, the visual presentation could become one of the title's key draws. For now, it sits at good for a demo, but work remains, and I'm hoping the development path proves promising. To be frank, when I saw the official minimum requirements asking for a GTX 1060 and 12 GB of RAM, I assumed the game would run smoothly across most setups. However, the reality of the demo differed significantly from what's on paper. Even running at medium settings, the game managed to hold 60 frames per second most of the time, but suffered from sporadic frame drops that were severe when they occurred. It wasn't a subtle stutter. It was a drop you felt instantly, often occurring at seemingly random moments. What bothered me was this inconsistency. This is a game blending PvE and PvP, where dodge and attack timing are vital. When the frame rate drops unexpectedly during player combat or a boss fight, it disrupts the experience entirely. Heavy, committed combat means little if the game cannot deliver the fluidity the gameplay demands. I was playing on a system above the recommended specifications and still experienced these hitches. Another element that stood out was the installation duration and the game's initial launch behavior. The demo took a long time to install, and upon booting, it felt as though the game was loading more background processes than necessary. This made me question whether asset optimization is fully refined or if memory management is lacking. The impression is that significant graphical load is being processed inefficiently. The developer announced a release date of July 29th, leaving me to wonder if there is enough time to polish these aspects. The issues don't appear limited to servers, which were already a headache during the beta. The visual construction of the maps is appealing and the atmosphere carries weight, but this demands hardware performance in a way that doesn't feel entirely justified by the visual fidelity on display. It isn't a title pushing photorealism, so this technical demand needs better balancing. Looking at the console experience, particularly on Xbox Series S, the situation remains similar. Performance test videos indicate the game struggles to maintain a stable frame rate, which is concerning given that the Series S represents the most accessible hardware baseline for this generation. If the game experiences difficulty there, mid-range PC users will notice it as well. Cross-platform optimization needs to be a priority, as the game features crossplay, and performance disparities between platforms can create real competitive disadvantages. What offers some encouragement is that Bellring Games appears receptive to player feedback. They responded directly to comments on Steam and conducted multiple surveys during the beta. However, performance optimization isn't achieved overnight. It requires rebuilding pipelines, optimizing shaders, and adjusting model LODs. The question is whether they were addressing this prior to the demo or if they are only starting now. The demo made it clear that the game requires more development time. Ultimately, if you're considering picking up Mistfall Hunter at launch, I recommend caution regarding performance. The concept is solid, and the combat shows potential, but the technical execution hasn't caught up yet. If they deliver on their optimizations by launch, great. But based on what I played and what has been shown, serious optimization work remains to prevent this from becoming another case of wait 6 months to play properly. Mistfall Hunter is a third-person PvPvE extraction ARPG featuring distinct classes, risky loot, and combat that combines tactical weight with the tension of losing everything if you fail to extract in time. The premise felt solid enough to warrant attention on launch day, especially given the accessible price point announced. Regarding whether to buy at launch or wait, after running multiple sessions, my impression is that the launch risk is relatively low. The price sits around $25 with a launch discount, making entry far easier than most titles in the genre. The demo already demonstrated an engaging loop and functional core systems. The areas needing adjustment seem like issues quick patches can address. Those who prefer waiting for extended reviews and the first major update aren't wrong either, but I personally see little reason to delay if the genre appeals to you. The game is easy to recommend if you enjoy Dark and Darker, Dungeonborn, or any extraction game infused with action RPG and dark fantasy elements. If you appreciate heavy combat, gear and skill-based progression, and don't mind the rush of risking your loot, the experience fits well, whether solo or in a trio. Players seeking pure PvE, a lengthy story, or an extremely polished product from minute one might find the pacing more challenging. What convinced me in practice was the risk-reward balance. Entering the mist, farming, crossing paths with another team, and deciding on the spot whether to fight or flee generates a brand of tension few games deliver this early on. The classes feature clear identities, and the talent system appears to offer plenty of depth. Official material from Bellring reinforces plans for seasonal content, new zones, bosses, and adjustments, which is usually a good indicator that the game won't be abandoned after launch. The weaknesses I noted, slightly repetitive PvE in sections and evolving balance, are present, but they didn't overshadow what already works. Another factor influencing the decision is the size of the community that turned out for the beta, notably high numbers. This generally supports healthy matchmaking during the initial months, provided the developer maintains a steady pace of updates. I saw genuine potential for this title to establish itself among 2026's most compelling extraction games, if post-launch support is responsive. Naturally, every new game carries uncertainty, but what has been shown so far leaves me more confident than hesitant. After weighing everything, I plan to purchase it at launch in the standard edition while taking advantage of the discount. The lower price significantly reduces the what if it fails factor, and the enjoyment I had in the demo was enough to make me want more runs, more builds, and the full end game. Based strictly on the demo and what the developer has presented, my personal assessment is that purchasing Mistfall Hunter at launch makes sense for those who already enjoy the genre and want a cost-effective title with an engaging loop. Waiting remains valid if you prefer maximum stability, but the current package feels mature enough to justify jumping in early.